like there's no denying or hiding the fact that I'm a nerdy, geeky mark. But even at my age, I still today think that the NWO is the greatest gimmick of all time. And even at my age, I'm 33. When me and my buddies are drinking, that's all we either speak about. Goodfellas, Bruce Springsteen, or the NWO.
Well, that's some pretty good company to be hanging out with.
But
I'll take that.
But the thing that I've got to say though, and this is something we've spoken about, well, me and my buddies, we talk about how the fact that the NWO gimmick was unfairly criticized because the usual what do you call it, a voice word or whatever that people says, oh, they added too many people and it got watered down. And it's like, yeah, well, maybe there was a lot of people in the faction, but a lot of those additions were amazing. When Kurt Hennig joined, that was an unbelievable angle. When the Giant joined, that was great. Scott Steiner, that was a great addition. And I think that the NWO gimmick in general was unfairly criticized. What would you think of that?
I don't know if it's unfair enough because everybody's got their perspective. Here's what, people behind the scenes and a lot of the people that were so critical of the expansion of the NWO, what they didn't know, and what they didn't know was that there was a reason for it and there was a plan for it. And the original intent of adding so many people to the NWO was so that NWO could eventually have its own roster and have its own television show, so that the NWO would be one brand and WCW would be a second brand. That was the reason why we did it. Now, if you don't know that, and you're not a part of those long-term discussions or decisions, then it would be very easy, without any information to make you think, it would be very easy just to feel like, holy crap, they just got too big too soon, too fast, because, it didn't make any sense to you. You couldn't, because you weren't on the inside. But that's unfortunate. I don't think it's unfair, from a fan's perspective, how they feel is how they feel. I think what's unfortunate, really unfortunate, is that we never really got a chance to execute on that plan. We never got to the point where NWO would have its own show and WCW would have its own show. And that's what's really unfortunate, because had that played out, people may or may not have a different feeling about it, but at least it would have been a manifestation of the original idea and at least made some sense.
But for me, especially with the NWO, because around that time they were on TV, I was big time into hip hop and gangster rap and stuff. Not so much anymore. I'm all about Michael Bublé. But back then, the idea of seeing like 9 to 12 guys walking out looking the same, it's like, no, that's a gang. This is real. That's what. And plus, in storyline world, shouldn't the heels want this crazy advantage over the baby faces?
Yeah, of course they should. But I think, you pointed out one of the compelling characteristics of the NWO. And again, I talked about casting just a little while ago. The NWO is an example of perfect casting. I don't think it could have possibly been cast any better than Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Hulk Hogan, the original three members, right? Yeah. Each one of them brought something very, very different and powerful to the table. Scott Hall had that very cool, almost Latin kind of vibe to it. And that's a character that he always had. People talk about, the toothpick gimmick, that was Razor Ramon. Scott Hall, when he was the Diamond Stud in WCW before he went to the WWE, WWF, used that toothpick and throwing it in his opponent's face and all that. A lot of the mannerisms and the way Scott carried himself had a very Scarface, if you will, kind of vibe to it, because that was a character that Scott used to model himself into that character, both in WCW and clearly when he got to WWE. So when he brought, remnants of the original Scott Diamond Stud character, and certainly some of that awareness of Scott, a large awareness of Scott in WWF came with him, and he just had that cool factor. Kevin Nash was dangerous. You know what I mean? He was that 7 foot tall, 350 pound, stare death in the eye and kill it kind of a character. He was a badass. And Hulk Hogan, I think, as a heel, probably brought more value because people really hated him when he turned. I mean, his heat was real. Scott and Kevin had kind of cool heat, where Hulk Hogan had real heat. And they were able to balance, the cast balanced itself out nicely, so there was nothing missing between the three of them. And I think it would be really hard to accomplish that today. It really would be. But that's one of the reasons why. And as the cast grew, here's an important part of that. Conan had a big influence on the NWO. So did X-Pac, by the way. People sometimes underestimate, the value that X-Pac brought to the NWO. He really did bring that vibe. Conan really brought it. That's where you start to see a little bit more of a direct kind of cultural connection between what was going on in the hip-hop world and what was going on in the NWO. With the do-rags, even the music, the way the guys carried themselves, very much was an extension of what was going on in pop culture in the hip-hop world.
Yeah, I loved it.